Hi, this is DarkFox127 and welcome back to another Starfield Creation Kit tutorial video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to navigate the Creation Kit from the Object window to the Cell view to the Render window and a few other windows that are really quite useful and give you some really good powerful tools when dealing with the Creation Kit. Now, I'm not going to go into super detail with some of this stuff, but I am going to give you a really good basic overview which will hopefully get a lot of you started in starting to really toy around with creating different mods. So something to note as well is that this video is likely to be a lot longer than my other ones, so do use the timestamps down below and the time scrubber in the video to navigate to the parts that you're going to find most useful, or just go ahead and watch the whole thing. So let's dive into it. So welcome to the Starfield Creation Kit. Let's dive into some of the main elements of the UI. I'm not going to cover absolutely everything because we really would be here all day, but I'm going to sort of show you around the basics, and then other videos are going to pick up on a lot of the details. Okay, so starting us off, we've got the menu bar at the top of the Creation Kit here, similar to other programs. If you click on File, you've got the data option for loading your mods and also other master files throughout the game. You've got saving your plugin. You have import and export for various forms from other plugins. You also have preferences, which is quite an interesting one. This one allows you to control all sorts of elements of the Creation Kit, how things work, all of the various different settings, and it gives you a really large amount of control over how different parts of the Creation Kit actually function, which is very useful. I won't be going into too much detail in this video on that one, but something that you should definitely take a look through, especially if things in the render window seem to be moving a little bit too quickly. You've got the movements tab, and there's a lot of other elements that you can really play around with here and really tailor this to work how you want it to work for you. Continuing on the menu bar under File, we've got the theme, which is very experimental at the time of this video. You've got your compacting of your form IDs for small and medium masters. This is also where you would convert your file once your mod is finished into a small, medium or full master. I've already got videos on that for creating a basic mod if you want more details on all of that stuff. We've got create an archive, so if you've got a lot of meshes, textures and other assets that need to be compiled for your mod to work and to be uploaded with it, that's where you would go ahead and create an archive. Again, that would be a separate video to this one. And we've also got log into Bethesda.net, although it is worth noting that at the time of this video this can be quite buggy, and even if you ask it to keep signed in, it tends to sign you out and you have to keep signing back in. It can be a bit weird. Under Edit, we've got all of the usual controls in various editing programs such as undo, redo, cutting, copying, pasting, all the shortcuts that come with it. Under View, we have a lot of options here for controlling different windows on the screen, different options and their default states. So if you wanted to open additional object windows, you can do that here. If you wanted to open more render windows, you can also do that, which is quite interesting. You've got the new packing feature, something we won't be covering in great detail in this video. And we've also got the other options here for different object windows, preview windows, showing windows that otherwise you may not have on here, things like showing the inspector, all of that good stuff, and even the warnings. So really just showing, bringing a lot of different windows to the forefront to give you greater control over what you're doing in the kit. Under Docs, I have a dedicated video for layouts if you want to go and check that out, which allows you to essentially position and size windows into different areas and save them as their own layouts. So it gives you a lot of flexibility when dealing with different types of mods so that you don't have to keep moving windows around and you can just save different layouts. Really handy. And again, this controls things like new object windows, render windows, and showing some other useful parts as well. Galaxy, I'm not going to be going into that, nor will I be going into World, but they do as they say on the tin. They provide control over things like new galaxies, world spaces. Terrain allows you to manipulate the ground terrain in exterior cells as well, so you can resize it, put bumps in it, color it, texture it, all of that. You have nav mesh. Nav mesh is obviously allowing you to control putting nav mesh down so that NPCs will be able to navigate the game world effectively. We have characters, which is, as you would expect, all related to quest aliases, dialogue, all of that sort of stuff. We have gameplay here, so settings is a very powerful tool here where you can actually get in and tweak values for game settings, which can be very powerful, simple changes in the Creation Kit. And also under gameplay, there are other things such as controlling your papyrus scripting, getting into things like animations, camera paths, all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of useful tools that you'll find in the menu bar along the top here, and also things to do with audio and just your standard help menu. Alongside the normal menu bar, we also have an additional toolbar underneath there that gives you a lot of control over different elements. There's a lot of shortcuts on the keyboard that goes with these as well. I'm not going to cover all of them, but you've got your data, your save game, your preferences on there. Some of these are sort of repeated from the menu bar, and you've got a lot of other control for things like controlling mainly the render window on the right hand side here, and just doing things like turning grass on and off, showing lights on and off. You've got also the nav mesh tool that's available in here. You've got all sorts of other controls for things like occlusion planes, for performance related stuff. You can do things like change the time of day, which in an exterior cell you would see more stuff happening there. Changing the biome that you can see. A lot of different tools, a lot of options on here. Some of this that will be covered later in the video as we continue to learn different elements of the kit. Taking a look at the object window on the left, this goes hand in hand with the inspector view, which I will cover shortly. The object window contains all of the various assets and different settings within the game. So this can be anything from actors through to different food items, as you can see here, all the way through to other world objects such as lights. You can control quests in here, making different quests, editing existing quests, all of that good stuff. You can also filter this down by expanding and collapsing all of the different trees here under the different sections, or if you would prefer, you can also type in the text filter at the top here. So we could do a search for Vasco, for example, click on actor and it will show us the Vasco actors within the game here, and we could double click on these to open those up and make any changes that we'd like. I'm just going to cancel that for now. And then we also have an option down the bottom here for all. Now, if you click on this and you've got something in the text filter, you should be perfectly fine. However, it is worth noting if you have a blank text filter and you click on this all option, it could cause the creation kit to go a little bit haywire and it might freeze up for a moment and take time, because that is essentially going to load every single object in the object window in the game, which will obviously slow things down a fair bit there. So something worth mentioning. Now on to the inspector view. As you select items down the left hand side here, the inspector view is going to show you different settings for those items, some of which you can access by double clicking and opening them, but this is really useful if you want to select a number of items and change different values for them. So if I just wipe out that filter there and I look for different food items, let's type in food, and let's say that I wanted to change the weight for a selection of food items, I could click on one in here and I can see all of the different information, all the different settings, the values for this particular piece of food. I could click into the filter and type in weight, and that will show the weight. And if I was to hold down Control and click on multiple of these, I could then see that these have multiple values, and I could actually go ahead and change the weight by just double clicking in there, setting a value that I like, and then hitting enter. And now all of those objects will be weighing one weight. And so that's really handy in the inspector, where you can sort of clear that out. You can lock it up, you can change the view, you can sort of filter things down in here, and essentially it allows you to change a lot of things all in one go rather than have to open up multiple different forms one after the other in the kit. And it's really, really slow. It's a super, super powerful tool, the inspector, and just allows you to see and manipulate information really, really quickly for different objects. Next up, we have the cell view at the bottom here. What this does is allows you to load various interior and exterior cells across the game. I will have a dedicated video for how you create and edit and manage different cells, but this is just going to give you a rough idea of how to load different cells into the kit. But essentially what we have here is a selection for either interior cells, which it's on by default, or all of the various world spaces that you can go ahead and view the cells for and then start to manipulate all of those. We're just going to stick with interior for now. As this is a very large list, one thing that you can do is you can actually narrow this down by typing into the filter, clicking on the drop down, and you can see we can start to see only sort of Cydonia in here, along with a few others as well. So the filter really helps with finding what you're looking for. We're just going to clear that out. You've also got X and Y coordinates. So if we were dealing with a world space here and we clicked on one of these and we were looking for specific coordinates, as you can see here, we could go ahead and type those in, hit go, and it should find them if they exist in the cell list. So again, you don't have to sort of scroll through and look for the exact position if you know where it is. You've also got the sort loaded add top as well. So if you've got a particular cell loaded here and you want that loaded at the very top of the list, you can go ahead and tick that option and it will send that straight to the very top. So I'm just going to go back to interior here, and I'm actually going to go to Cydonia. For some reason that has become my absolute go-to and I have no idea why. But all you have to do is simply double click on these cells to load them up into the render window at the top here. So let's just zoom that out for a moment, give that a second, and that will load in. Another thing with the cell view here is once you have got a cell loaded and selected, on the right hand side you will get a list of all of the various objects and forms within that cell. So as you can see, as I'm scrolling here, I can see all of the static items, the lights, all of that good stuff. You can also click on these different columns as you would expect to sort of sort things by different types or groups or editor ID. We also have a filter here as well. So if I was looking for Medbase, it would filter down and only show me anything with that in the text for the editor ID. I can clear that out and see everything again. And you've also got various different options here as well in terms of making things visible or active on a layer. Some of this stuff I'll be covering in future videos as well. And then if you really want, you can go ahead and unload the cell as well. So sometimes you just need a bit of a fresh start in the render window and you need to unload it and reload a cell. That will let you just unload it, double click on it again and reload it up. Editing cells in here, again, I'm going to have a separate video on this, but you can just right click on edit, give it a few seconds, and then that will also bring up a cell list here, the one that you specifically asked for, and then you can go ahead and make changes in here as well for that particular cell. Now for the main event, which is the render window. So this is the window into the game world, which allows you to manipulate interior and exterior cells and pretty much build exactly what you want. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention is something that's really thrown people off a little bit, which is the name at the top here. So usually it would have said render window, but for whatever reason, they've given it a really bizarre name, which is Gizmo Mode Absolute. And essentially this name just updates to give you different information based on the cell that's currently loaded. So at the top here, you can see that it says Cell Cydonia Firing Range 01. That's in Cydonia City. And there's a bunch of other information here as well, which is useful to obviously know what cell's loaded and the different info for it. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is what you want to do to get started is just click somewhere in the render window, click an object. They usually get highlighted green. This is what you would consider your focus point. And what you can do is zoom in and out by just scrolling on your mouse wheel. Now, some of these settings may be quite sensitive or they're not quite sensitive enough. I showed you earlier on the preferences section. You can use that to kind of tweak the render window, but just be very careful what values you're setting. But yeah, scrolling in and out is as easy as using the scroll wheel. There's also something called fine zoom, where if you hold down the V key and then just move your mouse up and down, you can see it's very, very, very slightly moving. This is usually best when you're working on very fine movement and details and you really need to zoom into something such as this barrel here. So if I hold down V and move back and forth, you can see I get a much, much finer zoom there, which is quite useful. And once I've got an object like this selected, I can use this as my sort of focus point to move around. And to do that, I hold down the Shift key and just move my mouse. And now I can rotate the camera around that focal point, around that object, and combine that with my zooming in and out to sort of move around the kit. Now, if you want to quickly refocus on an object, let's say I'm over here, you can hold down Shift and hit the F key. That will focus back to the object that you were on, which is quite handy. And I can also deselect that object by hitting the D key. Now there is a new way of moving around the creation kit which is incredibly useful rather than having to do it the old-fashioned way, clicking on items, rotating around them, and it was really quite janky. Over time you'd get used to it, but it could be incredibly fiddly, and that is by not doing that and killing everything. Give me a second, let me reload the range. I don't know what happened there. Let's just let that reload. But another way of moving around these cells is to hold the shift key. So if I yet again hold, just click on an item here, we'll sort of zoom in. I'll use shift and scroll as I've just done. But now that I'm down on the ground here, I can move a lot more freely. So if I hit D again to deselect and I hold down shift, I can actually do W, A, S and D. And I can move around in a more conventional way that you might use with a sort of fly cam in like a picture mode or something like that. And then I can just move my mouse. And that can point the way to where I want to go. And I can just hold down W, A, S or D to move around the render window, which is really, really nice. And I think a lot of people are going to use this an awful lot. They're going to find it a lot easier than the conventional way of moving around the kit. Now, if you find that this is a little too slow or it's a little bit too quick, you can actually use the scroll wheel to speed this up immensely, and you can zoom around the map. Something to note, however, is especially if you're in an exterior cell and you speed this up an awful lot, depending on your rig and how much is loaded in the cell, it might start to stutter and it will take a few seconds to load up, as you could see there, the next set of stuff in the creation kit. So it might be a little bit sluggish, so bear with it, let it do its thing. But that is another really, really good way of navigating around the creation kit. To show the manipulation of objects, I've gone ahead and loaded an interior cell, as it's going to be a lot easier to show you in here. And as you can see, we've got this nice little bowl on the side here, and what I want to be able to do is move this around, duplicate it, rotate it, do all sorts of things with it. So the way I can do this is just click on the bowl to select it, and to move it I can click and hold my primary mouse button, and then I can just move my mouse around, and that will allow me to move the object about the screen. If I right click and then move my mouse from side to side, I can rotate the object. You can also move objects on different axes. So if I hold down Z, that will let it go up and down. If I hold down X, that will allow it to go side to side one direction. And if I hold down C, that will allow it to go side to side another direction. Another thing I can do is hit the F key to floor it, and that will floor it down to the closest object with collision. Sometimes this is not perfect and it might leave a little bit of a gap that you don't see straight away, so just make sure you check your objects and make sure that they have landed against different surfaces nice and cleanly. For the most part it works quite well, but sometimes they will hover a little bit, so it's worth checking them. Now to resize an object, I can click and hold as if I was going to move it, and hold the S key as well, and then just move my mouse, and this will allow me to resize an object. If I want, I can go ahead and use gizmos as well if I want much finer control, especially for things like rotation. If I hit W, I get this nice little gizmo, and you'll see as you highlight different parts of it, the different colors, they go yellow, and I can click and hold my mouse button and it will move it on that particular axis. Control and Z to undo that, and I'll try a different direction here, and it gives you much finer control over the direction of your rotation. If I hit W again and then I hit E, E gives you more control over finer movement on different axes. So again, you'll click and select the different sort of arrows and squares here, and it'll allow you to move it much finer in different directions. And then I can also go ahead and duplicate an object by clicking on it, holding down Control and hitting D. Then if I just hold down Z and move it on an axis and move it up, you can see I've got a duplicate bowl. And I could go and floor that into the other bowl if I wanted, give it a spin around, and I could start making a stack of bowls if that's something that I wanted to do. Now you can also select multiple objects and they don't have to be the same. All you do is click on an object, hold down Control and keep clicking on more objects, and this will allow me to select multiple objects in the world. Now there are some things that I'm clicking here and it seems to be selecting different objects up in the sky here. Some things in the render window can have quite a radius around them where you'll click and you'll think you're selecting one thing and it's actually selecting another. I'll show you a trick very shortly for helping with that sort of thing. But essentially you can select multiple objects here, and you can also perform different actions on multiple objects using something called the batch menu. If you hit the dash key on the keyboard, you'll get this lovely little batch menu pop up, and it shows all the references that you currently have selected, and you can click on a different action such as set all as disabled, set it true or false, select a target, and then you can hit do, and it will do that on all of the objects rather than having to open every single one of them and perform the same action on all of them or set the same setting. It's a real time saver and makes a huge difference. So the other thing that you can do here when selecting different objects and moving them around the world, you'll see when we move things such as this flooring piece, it's all very loose. It's not really snapped onto a grid at all, and it's going to make it very difficult to line these pieces of floor up. So the way to deal with this is turning on the snap to grid function. If we just take a look at the top left here on our toolbar, you have two options at the top here with these little red symbols. One is called snap to grid and the other one is called snap to angle, and you can control these with Q and Control and Q shortcut on the keyboard, and it's quite essential that you use the shortcut key because it's just going to make it very difficult to deal with otherwise. So if I click on this floor piece again and I hit the Q key, next time that I go to move it, you will see that now it is actually snapped to a grid and it's moving around a little more juddered. But when I do Control and D and I make a copy of the floor piece and move it along, it will actually snap beautifully onto this other floor piece here, which is super useful. So I'm just going to delete one of those floor pieces, and I'm going to raise this up a little bit, because when I rotate it, you can see that's also rotating very loosely, but if I do Control and Q, that is then going to start to snap to a specific angle, which again, very useful to keep things very tidy, very straight, and click especially sort of toolkit pieces together nice and neatly. And then I could just slide that back into place if I wanted, although it's been a little bit fiddly, so I will leave that for now. I'm just going to delete the floor, why not? For the final part of this video, working with the render window especially, I have head back to my Cydonia firing range cell to demonstrate markers and how to hide them or show them. So markers are placed in the world, they are not visible in the game itself, and these are anything from signifying where NPCs will be sitting, as you can see here, to sort of NPC placement, where they're going to be standing, where different dust effects are sort of aiming toward, all that kind of stuff. Those markers kind of signify different things. However, when you are trying to do level design, these can very much get in the way. So what you can do is just hit the M key on the keyboard. This will hide or show all of the markers. So if I hit it again, you'll see that they all come back. And in addition to markers, in terms of hiding things, you can do the same for objects as well. So if you click on an object in the render window here and you hit the 1 key, you'll see it's slightly phased out. If you hit the 1 key again, it will completely disappear. And something else to note is if you then take a look at the cell view down the bottom here, you will see that certain objects are highlighted different colors depending on the state in the render window. So if I clicked on that object that we had just hidden and I hit the sort of click with the middle mouse button in the render window but still have it selected down there and hit 1, it will re-show it. Now that can be a little bit fiddly, so let's say that I have hidden a bunch of objects in here and I need to re-show everything. I can just use Alt and 1 and that will re-show everything. Now, object selection and showing and hiding different things, this has really been expanded massively in Starfield. which is excellent, and that is by using these options down here, which are picking preferences and show or hide. Now, there was some element of show or hide in previous creation kits, but it seems to have been expanded on slightly here. So these are really useful to have sitting alongside your render window. And the show and hide, first of all, does pretty much what you would expect on the tin. It allows you to show and hide different objects in the render window if you simply just don't want to see them whatsoever. So you could hide things like particles, world objects. So as you can see, that's now just turned into an absolute barren wasteland all of a sudden. The objects are still there, they're just hidden away, so you can focus on maybe landscape editing. But we can re-show those. We can do the same with markers. But the additional thing you can do here, which is super cool, is you can decide which markers you actually want to hide. So let's say that we only wanted furniture markers hidden. I can hide those, or I can re-show them. And this is a super powerful tool when you're maybe dealing with markers, but you want a lot of the other markers out of the way. It just gives a lot of freedom, a lot of flexibility in the kit to do things. So very similarly, when it comes to picking things, you may have no markers on the screen, all the markers on the screen, all sorts of objects shown on the screen, but you only want to select a certain type of object. Well, this is where the picking preferences comes in on the left-hand side, where you can essentially make sure that when you're clicking into the kit, you're not accidentally clicking on other objects like we did a little earlier on in the video. So let's say that I only wanted to be able to select markers under the pick only selection. I could click on markers. And now when I go into the render window and I go to click on an object, I can't click it. I can only click on markers. That's all it will let me select, which is super powerful. And then I could do the same. So if I only wanted to select a different sort of object, I could also limit it to that. Now you can do the opposite as well, and you can use the exclude. So it will make sure that you can then do the complete opposite, like I say, make it so that you can select anything but markers. So I can't select markers here, but I can select everything else. So really you can go ahead and switch and change and do different selections here pretty much on the fly to really help you out with your level design and make things super simple. One final but very quick mention here is also layers that I've got positioned at the top left here. What this allows you to do, and I'm not going to go into it in this video, it really deserves its own mini video, which I am going to be doing. But this essentially allows you to assign different objects in the render window to a layer, meaning that you could easily sort of show and hide a collection of objects on the fly without having to get too picky with those show and hide or picking preferences. A perfect example of this use would be if you're making a player home that has different states. So maybe a room can either be a kitchen or it could be a bedroom, and you've got a collection of objects assigned to each room. Layers are going to give you that kind of control to really see everything in a bedroom state or see everything in, say, a kitchen state. So that's something that I am going to have a dedicated video on, so that's why I've not covered it here. It's something that really does just deserve its own video. So I will be covering that going forward. And that is just about it for another Starfield Creation Kit tutorial video. So I hope you found it useful. Please let me know in the comments section below, and especially comment if you have any additional thoughts or anything that I might have missed. The Creation Kit for Starfield is a lot larger than anything that we've ever had before, so there's bound to be some things that I may have skipped over. Otherwise, if you are interested in catching more videos going forward, be sure to hit that like, subscribe and bell notification for more videos in the future. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you in the Starfield.